Good evening, everyone. My name is Pavel Levi. I'm a professor of art history here at Stanford and faculty director of Stanford Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies. I wish to welcome you all to this 18th annual Alexander Dallin lecture. The Dallin lecture series was established in 1998 to honor Professor of History and Political Science, Alexander Dallin, who was a founding figure of Russian and East European Studies at Stanford. He was also a longtime director of GREECE. The lecture series is funded by a special endowment jointly administered by GREECE and the Freeman-Spogli Institute for International Studies. Past Dallin lectures have featured some of the most prominent scholars in the fields of Russian, East European, and Eurasian studies, and among them Fyodor Lukyanov, Timothy Colton, Archie Brown, and most recently Misha Yampolsky, and then last year Vladimir Dubovik. Tonight, we are continuing this tradition of prestige as we have another renowned speaker with us, Lilia Shevtsova. Here to introduce the speaker is Michael McFall, Professor of Political Science and Director of the Freeman-Spogli Institute for International Studies.
It's great when people clap and you don't do anything but stand up. But thank you. It's great to see so many people here at 5:30. It's not a usual event here, Lilia, just so you know. It is a real honor for me to be here for two reasons. One is Alex Dallin was my professor. Without question, the person most responsible for my interest in Russia. And depending on whether you like or don't like the fact that I'm interested in Russia, you'll applaud that fact, but it came from Alex. Alex also, more than any professor I had at Stanford or Oxford for that matter, was the first person to help me think critically based on facts. It was always, I don't know, I see some people actually who had Alex Dallin as a professor as well, and I remember the first paper I wrote for him, I got, first of all, incredible comments that a lot of times professors don't give, but I remember very vividly the phrase, "How do you know?" in the margins, all the time. And the idea was you just don't get to make an assertion. There has to be critical analysis based on some set of facts to substantiate your hypothesis. That kept with me for decades. And I thought about it writing over because that's exactly what Professor Shevtsova, Lilia Shevtsova, our speaker, has been doing for decades when writing about Russia and Eastern Europe more broadly. Now, her formal titles are not important to me, though I'll mention to you them. She is a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution right now and an associate fellow at the Russia-Eurasian program at Chatham House. For decades, I want to say, Lilia, we were also colleagues at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, where she wrote, it says here 20 books. I can't believe that. It can't be 20. You're too young. But she wrote some very important books, and the three things you need to know about Lilia as a scholar are this. One, in my opinion, this was before I became ambassador, I would have said she is the best social scientist ever in Russia. But now that I've been an ambassador, let me rephrase that. She's one of the best social scientists that I've ever had the pleasure of knowing and reading, because you can't offend people you might meet in the future. But without question, over the years and really through the Stanford Berkeley program going back a quarter of a century, I see Gail here, you were one of the first scholars that we met from the Soviet Union that we spoke the same language and we wrote in the same way, particularly that very exciting time about transitions. Second, Lilia is one of the most keen observers of Russian politics. That's a different thing than being one of the best social scientists. You can be a good social scientist and not know anything about Russia. Likewise, you can know a lot about Russia and not be a very good social scientist. Lilia does both. When I was in the government, without question, if Lilia wrote something in the U.S. Embassy or when I worked at the White House, it was immediately circulated to everyone, and everyone, before they came to the 10 a.m. meeting, had to have read what Lilia had written the night before, because we took it that seriously. She, without question, was one of the people we relied on to understand what was going on in Russia. And from time to time, when I had the honor of hosting Lilia at Spaso House when I was ambassador, She was always our favorite guest because we knew it was going to be interesting when Lilia was there. Third thing you need to know about Lilia. She's very brave. The things she writes today, in the current context in Russia, you only do if you're brave and you believe in truth, and you believe in facts, and you believe that it will make Russia a better place, it will make our understanding of Russia a better place, and maybe in the long run it will make U.S.-Russian relations better. But you have to do that based on the facts, even when they are inconvenient. That's not easy to do today in Russia, and I deeply admire Lilia, both for all three things. Fantastic social scientist, keen observer of Russia, and a brave person who always speaks the truth based on facts. So it is really my honor to have introduced you to tonight my friend, my scholarly teammate, and our colleague tonight, Lilia Shevtsova.
Well, undeserved, but very pleasant. It's a great honor for me to be here today, and it's a privilege.
Speak into the microphone.
It's a privilege to give this year Alex Dallin lecture. And I'm very grateful to Chris, Pavle, to you, and to all those who collaborated in making at least my trip possible. And it's a great pleasure to see old friends. It's such a treat for me in Moscow to see you here. And it's such a nice weather. And now let me turn to my topic. Thanks to Gail Lapidus. Thank you, Gail, for the precious possibility and chance to give me opportunity to meet Alex. And to give me opportunity to sit in your rose gardens for so many times and discuss with you and Alex, looking at him, at his smile, and at his irony. Remember how he viewed our discussions back and forth? To take part in this absolutely wonderful Russian debates among the roses. And every time I thought that I was right, in the end, it appeared that he was right. In the end, he was right about everything. Well, you know, in times of ambivalence, in times of uncertainty, this is our time we are living in. In times where ideas do not matter, when ideology is put on the back burner, when pragmatism rules and cynicism is the key credo of the political world, and regretfully, expert community, we need people with intellectual honesty. We need people with principles. We need people with courage, with strategic view of reality and empathy. Alex Dallin was such a person. He was the best, apparently, at least in my view, translator of history. But there are so many great historians. Alex was translating history, making it understandable for the audience, for the readers, for the students. In one sense, through history, he explained the contemporary situation. He made it much more understandable. And now we're reading Alex's essays. There are some of them that are favorite of mine. Mike, remember his essays on the domestic roots of the Soviet foreign policy? It seems to me it's the best one. It's the best one on the interdependency between domestic agenda, domestic root causes, and international variables. And of course, my favorite one is, where have all the flowers gone? It's, you know, the example, not only of shrewdness, of intellectual brilliance, and of questions that we experts have always put before ourselves, even the questions that are not comfortable that questions that we cannot respond today, but maybe our students, our next generation will respond tomorrow. So I'm going to put the question, where have all the flowers gone? Today for discussion with you and for my deliberations. And the question will include just a couple of points. What are the reasons that Russia has turned from a possible potential partner of the West and the United States of America into the Western antithesis? Was it doomed? Was it inevitable? And what are possible perspectives? What are possible scenarios? Or Russia and the Russians are doomed to go down this tunnel until we go down in flames. But the canvas is so difficult for me, so contradictory, and the more I'm thinking about these questions, the more I'm coming to the conclusion that I don't have the exact answer that will satisfy me. So I will try to present several points in a way of brush strokes. I will make it not Picasso-like, but impressionistic. So the first point that I made for myself here, the point is about perceptions. Why perceptions of Russia, of Eurasia? Perception of the relationship between Russia and the West? Why these perceptions became a reality? And why we have been wrong about the major trends, about the major conclusions. Why we Russians and our foreign partners, Western experts, why we made so many mistakes, why we failed so many times, and why the West was shocked so many times. We shocked the West by the war with Georgia. We shocked the West by the war in Ukraine. Whoever anticipated Russia's annexation of Crimea and Russia's 1,000 troops in the east of Ukraine? Whoever expected the Russian new gambit in Syria? And it's not the first time Russia stunned, perplexed, flabbergasted the surrounding world. One has to remember the failure of Sovietology. Failure of Sovietology to predict the collapse and unraveling of the Soviet Union in 1991, just when the Western powers tried to prop up the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union had been unraveling already. And why we fail to understand post-communist Russia when it was absolutely evident, apparent, that Yeltsin was not a modernizer, nor democratic reformer, nor a liberal. And Putin was not a modernizer either. And when you go to the library, you'll see hundreds of books on the Russian liberal revolution of 1991, on Russia's modernization, Medvedev's, reformist ambitions, and Russia's partnership with the West. It seems to me that we all, myself included, first of all, because it's my constant worrying problem. Why was I so wrong at some point? So we have to eat our humble pie. And we have to ask ourselves, was it only our naivete? Was it our lack of stubborn desire to go ahead with unpleasant analysis? Or was it some practical interest, cooptation, desire to help the political authorities? Or was it everything together in one package? I still have to answer this question for myself. The second point, so I'm leaving these questions, in effect, as rhetorical ones without response, but I'm thinking, I'm constantly thinking about my own responsibility for misjudgments, for inability to predict, to analyze, and for failure to understand what's happening and what's going to happen. The second point, what are the factors of Russia's revisionism? And there is a kind of irony, apparently, when we look at the Soviet Union, at least in the end of 80s, became the status quo power, interested in stable rules of the game, interested in cooperation and even partnership with the West. And while Russia, post-communist Russia, became a revisionist and even revanchist state. The Soviet Union left the international arena and this world in the most peaceful way. It was a mesmerizing event. Mesmerizing, really, because in the history, at least in the new history, I don't know a single example when the huge empire, in time of peace, without any serious threat, inside and outside, vanishes from the global scene, peaceful, absolutely peaceful. But now we know that post-communist Russia is not going to leave this scene peacefully. And now we know that the leaders of Russia are going to kick over the global chessboard, undermining the rules of the game, blackmailing the world, and threatening to unravel the world once again. If the world and the West and the United States fail to accept the Kremlin's rules of the game and demands. So what are the reasons, motivations? And I already told Mike in the interval before that I watched his presentation in Michigan. Mike, and I have to admit that even I put myself before the mirror and I tried to repeat at least some elements of your performance in that video. But I agree with you in one thing. I would argue, just like Professor Mike McCall, that the key, the most decisive factor that forced, allowed Russia to ruin the post-Cold War order is the domestic agenda of the Russian system. Domestic factors, domestic variables, domestic needs of the system already in the state of decline to survive, to reproduce itself by moving from the imitation paradigm, let's pretend, imitating the Western liberal institutions and partnership with the West, towards fortress Russia, return towards containment, deterrence of the West, confrontation with the West. It's domestic need. But then again, let's scratch skin a little bit deeper. The fact that Putin has succeeded with his shift of paradigm, has succeeded with his pivot and got the Russia's consensus of various segments of the elite and population to live in the time of war and to live in the country of war. There has to be something else that made this pivot, this gamble, this project successful. And we are coming to some domestic variables that we have to keep in mind and maybe analyze. And maybe here at Stanford we'll have students who, in the typical Alex Dallin, Mike McCall manner, will write a book or a thesis or dissertation, the structure of domestic variables that made Russia a revanchist power. Very briefly, several of them that constitute the iron law of the Russian system of personalist power that made Putin the driving force. Among them, I would mention first of all the dwindling resources of the Russian system. Dwindling economic, social, administrative resources. at this stage of decay. An understanding of the fact by the Kremlin. The guys in the Kremlin understood that they have already not many possibilities to control the country in the previous way. Hence, this was one of the reasons to close the windows and doors, to hermetize the country, and to switch to the popular, to the known, to the old paradigm of survival, containment of the West, inside of Russia and outside of Russia. But there are also other factors among them. Michael, you were absolutely right mentioning the fact that people in 2011, 2012 took to the street, mass demonstrations, which proved to the leadership that for them to continue in a hybrid regime, in a soft authoritarian regime would be too dangerous. It was a very powerful factor. There was another factor, fear. Fear of the people that demonstrations or turmoil could bring the Ukrainian Maidan, or maybe civil war. And this fear pushed them to agree with the paradigm, to agree with the pivot, to agree with Russia turning into the antithesis of the West. Of course, this list of domestic variables could be prolonged, but I will mention one more variable, without which the domestic agenda apparently would not have worked. And what kind of factor is it? International factor. I would apparently bet even and argue that Putin would have never annexed Crimea. Putin would have never sent the troops to Ukraine the way he did. Maybe he would have done something else. But he would have never done it that way in 2014 if he didn't believe that America and Europe would stomach it. That Germany will never, ever, ever stop its acquiescence policy, and Merkel will continue to be a second shredder. Of course, when the events happened in Ukraine, the Kremlin would have reacted. Ukraine is too important, too crucial. It's being considered the limb of Russia. But this way, so international factor and long-term Western policy, let's acquiescence, let's do it, let's accommodate Russia. Let's be friendly to Putin. You know, we don't need to irritate him. We don't need to annoy him. This international factor, in my sense, created favorable international environment for the way Putin has pursued domestic agenda. Next factor. What about Ukraine? What about, my point number 3, what about Ukraine war and Syrian gambit? How to put it into the context of my conversation? Ukrainian Maidan and collapse of Yanukovych regime created an opportunity for Putin and for the Kremlin, a testing ground to pursue the new war paradigm. But the decision to switch to the new paradigm, the decision to switch to the war mood and war mode had been adopted before Ukraine, before Ukrainian events had developed. In 2008, 2009, Putin and the members of his team already were declaring the West is over. The epoch of the West has ended. You know, in a typical Spenglerian way. And now it's our goal, our task, and our ambition to fill the vacuum. And this idea about the end of the West, this idea about the need to fill the vacuum left by America and Europe has been formulated in the updated Russian foreign policy concept that was endorsed early 2013 before Ukraine. So Ukraine became, as I said, laboratory to work on the new concept. And in Ukraine, Moscow really has achieved spectacular success on various issues. Firstly, Putin has undermined the idea of the Russian Maidan, which was a heavy blow to any attempts to repeat, although there was no chance at that time to repeat it, but it was a blow against the Russian Maidan. Secondly, it was undermining the Ukrainian sovereignty, integrity, unity, and Ukrainian state, and undermining the Ukrainian vector towards Europe. Thirdly, it was a proxy war with the West and first of all America. And in this war, Putin apparently decided he wasn't the loser, at least at the beginning. But then, and here I'm mentioning one more important time juncture. Summer 2014. Okay. Already by the end of summer 2014, it became evident that the mega goals, Putin's mega goals in Ukraine, were not achieved. And the feeling that Moscow has to get out of Ukraine has accelerated already by fall of 2014. Hence, the Minsk Agreement, Minsk I and Minsk II, became the Kremlin's attempt to get out of the Ukrainian imbroglio as soon as possible. Various reasons and factors pushed the Kremlin to this decision. The Western sanctions and the fact that Germany consolidated Europe on the basis of sanctions, and there was transatlantic unity around this issue. It meant that the Kremlin failed to understand Western reaction and to predict the Western possible policy. And so, by the end of 2014, the Russian political elite has started desperately to look for the exit solution of the Ukrainian war. And Syrian gambit has to be viewed in this context. To get out of the war with Ukraine and to get back to the super Western mega league, back, not maybe as a member of the G8, but, the goal to break the isolation. Kremlin and Putin didn't want Russia to become North Korea. For many reasons, including the fact that for the first time in the Russian history and in the world's history, the elite of the antagonistic to the West, anti-liberal state has become part and parcel of the Western civilization, being personally integrated into the Western society. So the Russian political class, not a single element of this class, wanted a real confrontation with the West. Yes, they wanted to contain the West. And as Isaiah Berlin once said, not a single Russian ruler want to isolate Russia. They want only insulate the Russian society. But deal with the West and, and force the West to accept their rules of the game. So what are the goals in Syria? 3 goals, the triad. Firstly, at any price, to return back as a power respected, recognized, and sitting at the same table with the Western countries. Second goal, to force the West by blackmailing, by various tricks, actions, whatever, to accept the Russian idea of the new world order. And very briefly, it's not Yalta, or it's not only Yalta. It's not Westphalia with its respect for territorial integrity and non-interference. But this is the world, rather based on the idea of Carl Schmitt, one of the leading guru and ideologues of the Nazi Party. And the main idea of Carl Schmitt was, the more you break or undermine the rules, the more you increase legitimacy of the ruler. And in order to be strong, you have to force the rest of the world that you have been powerful and strong, you have the right to interpret the rules of the game. So it's not Yalta, it's not Potsdam, it's not Westphalia. It's idea of the hybrid world order. But there is also the third part of the triad. With Syrian gambit, reproduce the military patriotic legitimacy of power in Russia. Although you'll tell me that this is kind of not only suicidal, it's kind of weird. It's incompatible. How come Russia has to continue to contain the West inside of Russia and at the same time sit with the West, at the round tables, maybe returning back to the G8. It's just like driving two horses in opposite directions. But this is, for the time being, apparently the model, the agenda, the plan. And what about forcing the West to accept it? Well, the Russian rulers do it as they can. They're trying to enforce the West, to date them the way they can do by throwing stones, in the window. Two more points. Do you have 10 minutes? Who is controlling the time?
You are.
I'm on Moscow time, sorry. Next point, very briefly. Factors of survival and decay. There is a combination of factors. Despite of the fact that I'm in favor of one scenario, two scenarios, I have to admit the picture is much more complicated than sometimes I would like to see. So there are still a variety of factors that help to reproduce the Russian system of personalist power and the paradigm Russia is in. And among these factors, well, of course, tradition. Russia still is a hostage of history, tradition, is inertia of the population. Still, it's the rise of the paternalistic feelings. Still, nearly $400 billion, of the gold and currency reserves. Still is, existence of several Russias, and there is Russia of 25-30% of population that is totally archaic, that is glad to return back to the war mentality and to the enemy search, and are ready to give authorities this kind of legitimacy. There are a number of other factors that so far can sustain and give some kind of sustainability to the system, and this kind of state for 5, 10, 20, 25 years. No. To prolong this kind of agony. And in brackets, I would say, there are all arguments that the agony of the system and of the state started already in the 50s after the death of Stalin. So it has potential to limp along in a kind of political zombie. But let me mention also several factors that undermine and will continue to undermine the system and the state, the system state. And among these factors, there are several at least are amazing. The fact that Russia is becoming a consumerist society. And majority of Russians, they hate the idea of war. Only 13% of Russians, according to all polls, you can trust polls, you can distrust polls, but 13% are ready to sacrifice for the sake of the authorities. People stop sacrificing, and this was one of the most important Russian national characteristics. But there are several factors that are absolutely amazing. One factor, as I've mentioned, the nature of the Russian elite. Russian elite is the rentier class, interested in having good relationship with the West and insulating Russia, interested in being personally integrated into the West. And rentier class already has grudges about Putin's model of the war, because they want open borders for the West. It's the most pro-Western elite Russia has ever had when we are talking about style of life, interest of good relationship, possible relationship with the West. But second factor maybe is even more important. For the first time, also in the Russian history, Russian power structures, the so-called Siloviki, the Russian Praetorians, they rule Russia. We never had any kind of Praetorian regimes like, like Sadat or whatever. Praetorians, Siloviki, the power structures never ruled Russia. They always were under control of the civilian leadership. Today, they rule Russia. The dogs are sitting not at the Kremlin gate, they're sitting within the Kremlin. And what happened during the last 50 years, during the Putin's regime? The merger, the fusion between power, property, and repressive mechanism. And we know from history, when those who have to defend the regime acquire taste for property, the regime is doomed. Just like Sparta vanished into the grave, like Ottoman Empire vanished when the defenders started to be owners of the property. So when repressive mechanism becomes the owner of the property, the instinct to defend for idea vanishes. And of course, if there are any among students, among young generation, any people who like paradoxes, I would suggest an idea for an absolutely magnificent book or a work. And the idea is the following: the Russian liberals, and liberals in general, are much more instrumental in defending the authoritarian regime, the corrupted system in Russia, and maybe in some other countries too, than the power structures, that their input into the demolition and destruction of the corrupted authoritarian regime could be much bigger. And two more factors. Unintended consequences. This is my favorite topic. But apparently one needs to be a chess player to continue deliberation on the law of unintended consequences. Here I have in mind that whatever the political regime in Russia is doing at this stage of the agony of the system, is turning around. And there are a lot of confirmation of this fact. When any action, any political decision brings consequences, maybe not in the first row, but in the second, that are destructive for the system and the regime. Just look, the Kremlin has made the Russian political scene Sahara Desert. No voices, no strong opposition, nothing serious and important to challenge the Kremlin. And so what is the result? And the result is that in case of anger and dissatisfaction, people will take to the street because there are no other channels for self-expression. Another thing, Putin's absolutely amazing skyrocketing approval rating, 90%, nearly like Ceausescu's. But, if you dig deeper, you'll find that already after he reached 80%, it was a suicidal thing. And we all who are doing Russian history, we remember that the Communist Party of the Soviet Union collapsed the month it reached 99.9% approval rating. So the higher rating, the more possibility that it becomes the rating of lies, of despair, and totally meaningless. And we have to think about the results of mystifications, because making artificial reality, faking reality, making myths lying, cheating. You know, it's the way to do not only propaganda, to do legitimacy. But every mystification has its disastrous consequence. One example of mystification, majority of not only Russian experts. I'm not sure about how sincere Russian experts are, how sincere we are. We are too emotional to be sincere. Anyway, everybody thinks that Russia is a great power in the sense that people would love Russia to be a great power. And 90% of Russians would say that yes, they think that Russia cannot exist in a different way, but only as a superpower, as a great power. But if you dig deeper, if you scratch the skin, if you raise some other questions, you'll find that no, 49% of Russians believe that great power means to live normally like in Europe. And 58% are not going to fight for great power. So it's a different notion of great power. And the final issue. Any way out? Is there any way out that Russia starts to pursue pro-European path? I don't have the courage or time to respond to this question the way I would love to. But several maybe tentative thoughts. There are all evidence and all signs that it's much easier to make an extrication, an exit from communism. And blessed are the countries like Baltic states, like Eastern Europe, that made this rather successful, nearly in all cases, exit from communism. For various reasons, it was blessing. And communism was blessing in a way it didn't demolish the prerequisites and grounds for liberal pro-European transformation. Post-communism, and especially nearly 20 years of post-communism in Russia, in new independent states, Moldova, Ukraine, Belarus, Central Asia, Caucasus states, it's the worst thing that could ever happen to us from the point of view of demoralization of society, degradation of the elite, and we have, when we are talking about quality, post-communist elite is the worst professionally, ethically, morally. So how to make extrication from that? I'm just watching Ukraine and I'm thinking about Ukraine with all my hope, because if Ukraine and when Ukraine does it, it will be an evidence that post-communism is not a totally 100%, hindrance for liberal transformation. But so far, I'm not sure. In any case, it will be a very painful, dramatic exercise. But at the same time, there is at least one glimpse of hope, because I want to find in my gloomy picture of interregnum some kind of hope on interregnum. I recall the Polish-British sociologist Zygmunt Bauman, who said about our time of interregnum, post-communism. Imagine you are aboard on a plane, and you have a chance to peek into the cockpit, and you see that there is no pilot there. But you don't know yet that the aerodrome you're heading for has not been built yet. So, I have the same feeling being on the boat on this plane. But there is a glimpse of hope, as I promised, and this glimpse of hope is the following. There are at least stable results of the polls. I don't trust totally the polls, but we don't have any other instrument to measure what's going behind the scene, what kind of bubbles we have. So all results of the polls in Russia persuade us that there are at least between 12 and 19% of those people, 12-19, of those people who support liberal democratic values and understand what it means, who support rule of law paradigm. Tiny, teeny minority, but still in the big cities, in the most important cities. 30% are totally in the past, on their way to political graveyard. They support empire, leadership, everything, war paradigm, etc. And they cannot be passively behind this totally obsolete ideas. But the rest, what about the rest, the swarm? Russia's destiny depends not only on how active these 12–19% are going to be, but what will be the position of the swarm when the moment of truth will be coming. And so it appears that these people who are currently voting for Putin, for United Russia, supporting the Kremlin, they at the same time have desire, longing, desperate longing for normal life. They view superpower as the power that can guarantee security to the individual. They, majority of them support private property. 58% say that Russia needs political pluralism. So these people can accept the new political system. The difference between them and Ukrainians, between us and Ukrainians is one. And apparently, strangely, that we have such different mentality. Ukrainians are ready to die and to fight for political pluralism and dignity. And Russians are waiting when the new system is offered to them. So far, this is the difference. And I'm coming to Alex again. Of course, what's happening to Russia will be a challenge. Will be apparently the key challenge for Europe, for Eurasia, or maybe it will be the key global challenge, because Russia's destiny is not only about geopolitical agenda, it's not about projecting power, it's about clash between the liberal world and between, on the one hand, liberal democracy that is paralyzed on the other hand. And of course, what's happening to Russia will impact the security, the energy security, the nuclear security, the way new independent states will be developing, the way China will project itself, and maybe the way liberal democracies will be thinking about themselves. And at least we have to give due to Putin for one thing. It has, Putin, by what he did, has reanimated NATO, forced Europe to think about European values. At least he did something positive. And here is Alex again. I think that he was right predicting, I'm quoting, that Russia's transformation is likely to be particularly painful, dramatic, protracted, and perverse. I hope that he's right here. But I hope that he's right also when he said, in the end of his brilliant essay, "Where have all the flowers gone?" He says, in time, the flowers will bloom again. And thank you for your patience. I was too long, but you are so nice.